of Britt's story. Excuse me. First of all, let me apologize for starting late. Supposed to start at 1. Set the time to a little later because I had some other things I had to get finished, and now I'm a few minutes late to that, but I apologize. I'm here. Now we're going to go over the story. Thank you if you were waiting. I appreciate you being here. Excited to share more and to dive into Honesty is the Best Policy. That's the name of the section we're going to be talking about today. We are going to do a just quick review of the last part from last week, so you remember where we left off before we dive into the next few sections. Okay, so the last portion that we read last week was called The Truth Hurts. Hey, South to West, thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. So we're going to review The Truth Hurts before we go into the new section today. So, the luster of returning home to the Bay Area wore off after a few months when reality set in. I was living at my mom's house at 29 years old during a global pandemic, and I felt completely lost. I had stripped away all of the distractions I used to avoid myself. I quit social media, left behind the shallow relationships that came with it, stopped working out, stepped back from work, and let go of obsessing over food and body image. I was flooded with realizations about myself, my family, my relationships. Emotions and traumas that had been buried for years were surfacing as a result of my commitment to healing. I had made courageous steps towards finding my inner truth with the intention of becoming a better version of myself. The truth of who I really was at my core was peeking through a little more each day. Something to feel good about, right? Honestly, it felt like shit. I often felt inconsolably sad and completely out of control. My emotions were a torrential hurricane. Without achieving, without working out constantly, without using external validation to prop myself up, I was faced with the uncomfortable realizations that highlighted pain and regrets from the past and caused doom spirals of anxiety and depression. I felt horrible, like a useless waste of space. Meaningless, unmotivated, purposeless, sad, frustrated, confused, angry, ashamed, and guilty. Hey Deb, thanks for joining. From a young age, I had fears and insecurities that caused me to believe I was lacking something that other people had, that shyness and introversion were huge flaws, that there was something unworthy and unlovable about me, and that I needed to change in order to be liked. Now, I think I mentioned this last week, but I forget what I was actually going to say there to lead into this, but I just want to say that I had a good childhood. I didn't have a horrible childhood. I had a family who loved me, probably some normal family dysfunction, but I, from a young age, just kind of felt like there was something like off about me, and I think deep down what I uncovered through going through this process is like I felt unlovable, I felt unworthy, and I don't really know exactly where that stems from because again, nobody told me that, nobody was telling, like I know I was loved, but that's just something that was there inside of me. I covered it all up by doing just that. I made it seem like I was confident. I was so convincing, I even believed it myself after a while. It wasn't until I stripped away all the layers of pretending I used to make myself feel worthy that I came to the truth of how badly I felt about myself deep down inside. For most of my life, I didn't believe in God. I never thought it was for me. But something happened in January 2020 that's the strongest evidence I have for God. My heart opened. I allowed myself to believe in a higher power and let go of the notion that I have to do and fix everything on my own. I asked God to humble me early on in my spiritual journey. I knew that arrogance stood in the way of my relationship with God. Humbling is exactly what I would call this period of time that I went through. I chose to face the deep, dark parts of myself that I was terrified to look at, the parts that made it hard for me to accept, forgive, and love myself. Through the humility that comes from my own struggle, I see that others are wrestling with their dark side too. Now I'm able to feel empathy for other people's inner battles, and I understand that we're all children of God, worthy of love and compassion. Sometimes I still feel incredibly lost and alone, and other times I have deeper realizations that put me at ease. My ability to see, feel, and recognize things in the people around me is growing as well. It's much harder to live my life this way than in the pleasure-seeking, nothing can hurt me, achievement is everything way that I was living before. But it's worth it. It's real, it's honest, it's the truth, and the truth sets us free. So that is a little recap from last week, the last section that we read last week, and now we're going to go into the new part called Honesty is the Best Policy. Do you ever struggle to be honest with yourself? Let me know in the chat. Let me know if you ever struggle to be honest with yourself, or if maybe you're not even sure if you're honest with yourself or not. Let me know in the chat if you struggle with that. Because I know I do. As I've shared in previous emails, there were many situations in which I struggled to be honest with myself. And if you can't be honest with yourself, you can't really be honest with anyone. Being honest would have led to realizations that, at that time, seemed too uncomfortable to bear. If I admitted that achievement wasn't the path to fulfillment, I would have to admit that all the achievements I chased were in vain, and I had no clue how to find fulfillment. If I admitted that exercising as much as I did was unhealthy, I would have to admit it was a coping mechanism for deeper issues and question what those were. If I admitted that I had moved to San Diego to avoid familial issues, I would have to admit that I needed to move back and face the turmoil of trying to resolve them. If I admitted that my approach to relationships was shallow, I would have to admit I didn't understand how to connect deeply, and I was afraid of it. If I admitted that atheism could be false, I would have to consider the possibility that God is real, and I'd been living in a way that caused unnecessary suffering and harm to other people. It took a long time for me to be willing to look at myself in the mirror. I didn't do it alone either. It took someone else mirroring my actions and choices back to me before I could see what was obvious from the outside looking in. Often we can see what's going on with others with crystal clarity, yet we are blind when it comes to ourselves. Have you ever had that happen to you? Have you ever been able to just you can look at what someone's doing and be like, why are they doing that? I know that they should be doing X, Y, and Z, or I know that's wrong, or it's so annoying when they're doing that. How do they not see that? Because I know I'm very guilty of that, but then be blind to the fact that I do the same thing, maybe exactly the same thing, or maybe the same thing, but just one step removed. And often the things that we can, clearly see in others that irritate us or that we think are, silly or stupid, very often if we really put the mirror in front of ourselves, we're doing the same thing. And probably we're irritated because we don't like that we do it at some level. We may be conscious that we're doing it and we don't like it. I've seen this over and over again in my life. I get irritated by the behavior of others, ranting in what feels like justified indignation, only to realize I do the same thing, which is why it irritates me in the first place. I condemn my parents' actions, only to realize I've modeled their exact behaviors many times throughout my life. I deny having ulterior motives for things that I ask or say, but when I sit with it, there are subtle, self-serving reasons why I ask or say them. I've found the less I resist the lessons that come from being completely honest, the more fully I learn the lesson. It's when I resist the truth that I suffer. It can be hard to be honest. Our ego protects us from looking at the darker parts of ourselves that we don't like. We may think that we're not hurting anyone but ourselves when we engage in self-deception. I used to believe that. Now I see that being truthful with myself affects everyone around me. When I'm honest, it's easier to discern what is true and what is not, and it guides me towards integrity. And that kind of goes to a point that South to West just made earlier. Yes, sometimes I'm not even sure what the truth is. Does anyone really know what the truth is, especially in today's world where we are inundated by information on social media and with the news, and just our phone has all this stuff, Google, and we think that everything, well, this must be true. It's by this, certain publication, or well, it's here. This person is saying it must be true, right? We don't know. I think the best way to better be able to discern truth, I think the only way to be able to have a better grasp at discerning truth is to look at ourselves honestly. Because when our internal environment, in our own mind, we've created deceptions about ourselves and why we're doing what we're doing and why we say this and why we act a certain way. If we can't even get clear on that, there's no way we can see clearly out into the world and actually see what's going on. I know that from my own experience, and I can see it in some of the people around me. By no means have I achieved perfection of honesty with myself. I don't think it's possible. But I think the more honest I can be with myself and try to not judge myself so much for it. Like I said here, the less I resist the lessons, the more fully I learn the lesson. If there's something unpleasant about myself that I don't want to look at, I'm like, don't look at that. The harder the less I learn from it and the harder it is. If I just accept it like, oh, I said that because I was trying to control the situation. Okay. I wonder why I do that. And I can better learn the lesson of like why I'm doing the things I'm doing or saying the things that I'm saying instead of being like, no, that's not why I'm doing it, because I don't want that to be why I'm doing it. Again, it's like, maybe you've heard people talk about embracing their shadow self or like the dark side of themselves. We all have certain things in our nature, I think, too, certain selfish things in our nature, certain things where we seek pleasure or we seek, validation. I think it's normal to seek those things. And I think it's important to be aware of when we're doing it, why we're doing it, and whether it's really how we want to operate and whether it really aligns with our values. If you have any other thoughts or comments on that first section, let me know. The next part we're going to dive into is called I Had to Try Something. So this is the next section of the story. One of the hardest parts of my personal journey has been not knowing, and not knowing how to get to a place of knowing. What's the path to fulfillment? How do I figure out what to do? What do I do when I don't know? This is definitely a bit of a challenge for me because I gotta turn my bone broth down real quick. I think it's cooking a little too hard. I was worried that was gonna happen. I almost forgot about it. Okay, so as I mentioned, sometimes there's things that I say or do because I realize I'm actually trying to control the situation, because you know what? Many of us struggle with that. We want to feel like we're in control. Why? Because life is out of our control. Many things are out of our control. We can't control how and when we're going to die. You can eat well, you can exercise, you can do all the things you're supposed to do, and you might still get sick. You might still have something happen. So we really can't control that much. And so we try to control other things. It's part of the reason people get eating disorders. People are trying to be in control of something. Maybe their life feels out of control and they're trying to at least have control over their body. And maybe that's not a conscious thing, like they don't realize that's why they're doing it, but that can often be intertwined with it. So what's the path to fulfillment? How do I figure out what to do? What do I do when I don't know? I used to base my answers on what I thought I was supposed to do, what others would expect me to do, or what would give me external validation. Now that I'm on a path of deciding what's real and right for me, the me underneath all the conditioning, it can be much harder to figure out. There is no roadmap to my or your personal fulfillment. If someone says there is, they don't know. Those who know don't say, and those who say don't know. That's a quote by Lao Tzu. It's a good one. I've had to come to terms with my own victim mentality. Still working on that. Constantly saying I don't know and trapping myself in misery around not knowing is a form of victimhood. There's many forms. As scary and overwhelming as it may feel, it's my life. I have agency over it, and no one else can walk this path for me. Knowing that I have a tendency to fall into victimhood doesn't necessarily stop it from happening, though. I was feeling very stuck and emotionally overwhelmed at the beginning of the year. This was in, I think, 2021. Mired in fear because I didn't know where to go or what to do next. Sometimes all it takes to get further is to take a step in a direction, any direction. My mom recommended I try a process painting workshop, and I thought, I've got nothing to lose and nothing to do today anyway. So I jumped on the opportunity. So process painting workshop, it's just where you make art without the intention of it looking like anything. So when I had done art in the past, it was about like, oh, I'm going to try to paint this picture. I'm going to try to paint this animal, make it look real. It was very achievement focused. This workshop was awesome because it was just about put onto the paper what's inside of you. Just let your creativity guide you, and it doesn't matter at all what it looks like, whether it's pretty or not. It's an expression of your innate creativity. Really cool. If you've ever had a chance to try it, if you have never had a chance to try it, I recommend it. Lo and behold, it was a very healing experience to place my emotions onto paper, and the artwork helped me move into a different state of mind. So it wasn't that I then just decided to do process painting all the time. It just was an experience that helped move me into a different place that I had been stuck. And it was just by taking a step in a direction, any direction. It took the willingness to try something, even though I had no idea if it would be helpful, that turned things around and got me beyond the storm of despair. From there, I was able to let go of fear and keep taking steps forward. Being the author of my own story is difficult, and I get stuck and fearful at times. However, I believe that if I'm committed to the process and open-minded enough to keep taking steps, there's freedom on the other side. Let me know if you have any thoughts about that section or if you can relate to any of that. And then we got one more section we're going to read today. Any thoughts? Curious if anyone else has ever felt stuck and how they were able to get out of being stuck. Whether it's stuck emotionally or psychologically or in a certain situation, let me know in the chat. Well, Trap Phone told me I have a big head, so that's unrelated to the story, but, you know, good to know. YouTube tells me this all the time, or people on YouTube tell me this all the time. I have a big head because I got big brains. Yeah, Southwest said, I've been stuck, took years to get out. Was there anything in particular that helped you get out, or did it just take time? So the final section we're going to read. Oh, Southwest said, just got sick of being stuck. You know what? That's a really good one. There's another, I think this is from a book called Awareness by Anthony DeMello. So in this book, he talks about the difference between a psychologist and like a spiritual guru or a spiritual mentor or advisor. The psychologist will try to help you feel better when you're feeling bad. They'll like try to talk to you and help you to like feel better. But the spiritual advisor or guru will say, leave her alone. Eventually she'll get so sick of herself that she'll decide to make a change. Which I think is really true. Sometimes I think the things we do to placate, like I was talking about, all these things I used to kind of avoid being honest with myself and kind of placate myself, use social media for external validation, exercise all the time to avoid myself and feel like I was doing something productive. Those things, it's like it makes you feel better, but sometimes you just need to sit in your misery so you get tired enough of it to like actually make a change. So thanks for bringing that up, Southwest. Chaco said movement makes you feel alive. Holy Spirit helped. Yeah, I think movement can be it could be part of the problem or it could be a solution. Absolutely. Yeah, if we get uncomfortable enough, we'll finally take action. And of course, it's not a blanket statement. Some people really do need help depending on the situation. You need help and support. But some people just need to sit in it until they get sick of it and then, okay, I need to do something else. That was the case for me, I think. So this last section is called My Journey to Finding God. I grew up atheist and internalized the idea that belief in God is bullshit. In my family, intellect was prized above all. Believing in God was mostly seen as folly, an excuse to not work hard or think for yourself or something to cling to because you're afraid of dying. I never questioned whether my family's beliefs were my own. I simply thought God was not for me. Just always thought that. Although when I look back at my childhood journals, I find that in desperate times, I would write prayers to God. If you're really there, God, please help me, that kind of thing. It wasn't until I embarked on the search for meaning that I realized I was missing a large piece of the puzzle by closing myself to God or the possibility of God. I met a Christian in 2020 who completely changed my perspective on God and Christianity. The type of person who emanates love and positive energy in a way that is palpable to anyone in their presence. And if you've ever experienced this, you know what I'm talking about. You just are like, what does this person have? I want it. I knew immediately that I wanted to embody what this person embodied, that I wanted to know what they knew, but because I could tell they had answers to the questions in my heart. I began to learn about God by reading the Bible and other books, Christian, Buddhist, other spiritual works. I started watching The Chosen. Any Chosen fans out there, let me know. It's a TV series about the life of Christ. I started listening to worship music. I began to pray to God in earnest for myself and my loved ones. I meditated, I did breath work, and practiced being as present as possible. I spent a lot of time pondering what it means to live life believing God exists and how that changes my thoughts, intentions, and actions. One of the reasons I felt unfulfilled was that I was always pushing so hard, trying to do everything myself, thinking I had to control my life and control every aspect of my life. Opening myself up to the idea that nothing is in my control, that I could let things unfold naturally, and that there's a God guiding things in the direction they're meant to go was simultaneously scary and relieving. I also realized that at my core, I felt like I wasn't worthy of God's divine love. For that reason, the story of Jesus' mercy and forgiveness spoke to me deeply. I had several experiences over the past few years where I was shown signs and given realizations with such divine timing that I cannot explain them with anything other than God. I found I could experience a lot of gratitude, joy, and comfort by letting myself have faith, even if that faith was relentlessly questioned by the other part of me that still believes things need to be tangible to be true. I've heard it said that only God can fulfill my needs and repair my wounds. That God's love is the most wonderful love there is. That God will be there for me, carrying me through tough times. That God loves me unconditionally, that God is listening. Sometimes those ideas upset me because I don't understand how to feel them or how to have complete faith in God. I see other people's faith and I really admire it. I haven't figured out what it means to connect with God in a personal way, one that isn't based on what external sources tell me, books, people, society, religion, etc. Sometimes the atheist ideas I grew up with come in and fight against the part of me that wants to believe. Was that God talking to me or just my imagination? If God is all-powerful, why doesn't he make things obvious? Is he even listening to me? Why doesn't he just talk back? I have a hard time letting go of my expectations around what God should do for me and how it should feel to have a real relationship. I know those things stand in my way of experiencing the mystery of God, and it's frustrating. Someone recently told me to approach my relationship with God like I would any other relationship. Getting to know someone takes time. Relationships require effort on both sides, and each has to learn to understand the way that the other communicates. Unrealistic expectations get in the way. It means I want to control how someone shows up for me instead of letting them love me in the way that is true for them. While I still struggle to understand or describe my relationship with God, my journey to discern more of the mystery continues. One of the most important things I've learned so far is that some things simply cannot be explained by thinking or rationalizing. They can only be felt and understood intuitively. I feel that I'm called to walk a spiritual path, even if I can't explain why or what I'll get out of it. And that's the end of that section. Let me know if you have any thoughts on that part. Chaco said, only love that is unconditional is the love of Christ. Yep, I think that is true. Amen, said Southwest. Camille said he's been off the gym because of moving across the country and changing a job. That's okay. Some seasons of life are not gym times. Let me know if you guys have any other thoughts on my story today. We just have a couple sections of the story left. We're going to have a little delay in telling it because I'm not going to be doing YouTube Live for a couple weeks. So we're going to have to reconvene to finish the last of it in June. Again, I had mentioned that I have my story on my website. It's not public, but if you're interested in reading through it, if you want to revisit some of the other sections, read it yourself, you can let me know and I can drop the link for you. And I appreciate you listening and sharing your thoughts. Let me know if you have any questions or thoughts on the story thus far. Yeah, Camille said he's fallen out of his routine completely and he misses his old life sometimes. Change is challenging. There are times where you fall out of routine and you just got to slowly get back into it. I'm sure you'll find your rhythm again in this new stage of your life. Any other thoughts or comments? Chaka said, why do you look so dismayed? I don't know, because no one's commenting on my story, probably. Yeah, new beginnings can be hard, but they can also be fun and exciting. I think just if I don't smile, maybe I just don't look like I'm so happy, but it's just my resting normal face. Thanks, South to West. I appreciate that. I appreciate you tuning in and listening. Still got a couple sections. Thanks, Chaco. Chaco said you sharing it takes courage. It's definitely easier to just read it to my phone than it probably would be to tell somebody about it in my own words face to face. That's for sure. But it has been a few years, so it's not super like raw and fresh at this point. Camille asked, did I ever move like far away? The furthest I've moved from where I grew up is an 8-hour drive. So I've never lived, I've always lived in the same state in the United States. So I have not moved super, super far away. I'm sure it's an adjustment. All right, well, I appreciate you guys tuning in today. And if you didn't catch the earlier parts of my story, you can catch them on the live tab. You'll see the other parts that came before this you can check out. And again, there's gonna be a little delay before the next part of my story. I'll put it up so you know when it's gonna be and you can put it on your calendar, but it's gonna be a couple weeks. So thanks for being here. Stay tuned for the last portion of the story coming in a few weeks, and have a wonderful week.